Hare Om Namaha. We find the following excerpt from a letter to Hangsaduta dated September 2nd, 1970, quote, "Regarding the poisonous effect in our society, it is a fact, and I know wherefrom this poison tree has sprung up and how it affected practically the whole society in a very dangerous form. I think in the parampara system that the poison administered to our society will not act if some of our students are as good as Prahlad Maharaj. I have therefore given the administrative power to the governing body commission. You are also one of the members of the GBC, so you can think over very deeply how to save the situation. It is a fact, however, that the great sinister movement is within our society," unquote. The context of what was going down at that time was a localized insurrection within the movement by four of its most prominent leaders. The GBC had just been formed by Prabhupada in order to, as he put it, save the situation. The four insurrectionists were saying that Prabhupada was God, that he was displeased with his disciples, and they were proposing a centralized solution to the problem. Their propaganda was that Prabhupada was God, and then they locked God into his room. That he was God was against his teaching, and he never said that he was the Supreme Lord. He did say that pure devotees, such as himself, should be worshipped like God would be worshipped, the all-pure, because they carried the pure and perfect message. However, that was never to be misconstrued that he was actually the Parameshvara, because he gave counterindications repeatedly that such was not the case. He was against that proposal, which was common Eastern dogma in Mayavad circles and propagated by the prominent Mayavadi gurus in the Western world at that time. Although Prabhupada was certainly displeased with those four men who were causing the havoc in his movement, he was not displeased with the rest of his disciples. He was not displeased with the 12 leaders he appointed as the original governing body commissioners. He had deputed them to eradicate this poison that had entered his branch of the Hare Krishna movement. They worked to do so, and that seva paid off, as the four deviants were finally stopped and then dispersed. The solution those four men had proposed was outrageous. They wanted to close all the centers throughout America and consolidate them into one new center in Greenwich Village. This was also against Prabhupada's plan, which was established in the previous 4 years. His plan was meant to expand the preaching centers throughout America. The plan of those four men never gained enough traction to get off the ground, despite the fact that they did, for all practical purposes, lock Prabhupada up in his quarters at the Los Angeles Center, although he was allowed to have disciples visit him. That is when he formed the GBC with those 12 men, and some of them assisted his doing so. There's some background here that needs to be elucidated, and not for the first time. Prabhupada's treasurer in the New York Center had sent monies to India for devotional paraphernalia, which was not received. It appeared that, without pressure and intervention, it would never be shipped to ISKCON. It was not forthcoming, so Prabhupada deputed Brahmananda, one of his initiated disciples and the president of the New York Center, to travel to India in order to secure those orders. While in India, Brahmananda came into contact with a number of Prabhupada's godbrothers, some of whom were influential in Gaudiya Math. All those he met were Gaudiya Math acolytes, but Prabhupada no longer respected or approved of Gaudiya Math. This would be clearly revealed a bit later in his books and to his leaders in letters. Actually, Prabhupada was no longer an active member in that institution. He had formed his own organization, ISKCON, and there was no connection to Gaudiya Math to be had there. There was obviously friction between him and many of the Gaudiya Math leaders, and they were all dead against his going to the West to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya. Brahmananda was victimized by some of those influential Gaudiya Math leaders. He was made to doubt Prabhupada's legitimacy. He was informed of the Gaudiya Math version of its history, and Prabhupada, who had a different perspective, did not fare well in that narrative account. Brahmananda became bewildered and negatively impacted. He came back to America with that poison in his astral body. From a kind of malefic quasi-empowerment, which was, of course, Gaudiya Math empowerment, he influenced 3 other godbrothers to lead the insurrection, which Prabhupada accurately termed to have a poisonous effect in his society. What has just been detailed is a synopsis of what was going down when Prabhupada wrote that letter to Hangsaduta on September 2nd, 1970. As such, it is blatantly obvious that the great sinister movement referred to in the letter was Gaudiya Math. Anyone who disputes this with a different interpretation is pushing a diversion and/or willfully blind to the history and essential context contained within that letter. It has been established in the written record for our benefit. Did this inimical and malefic energy of Gaudiya Math dissipate and go away during the 11 years of Prabhupada's Western preaching mission? It did not. Sometimes it was dormant to a limited extent, but it never disappeared. Gaudiya Math remained the great sinister movement that Prabhupada had rightly tagged it to be. Indeed, in an important purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he called Gaudiya Math asara, or useless. The context, in terms of application, was that Gaudiya Math no longer could effectively preach the message of Lord Chaitanya due to its many deviations. Only some of those deviations were exposed by Prabhupada while he was with us. However, just as, in its first of many such later attempts, Gaudiya Math leaders insidiously polluted Brahmananda, that whole effort against Prabhupada's movement would continue. It continued in a major way in the spring of 1978. It continued just after that, when a significant number of Prabhupada's initiated disciples, most of them sannyasis, crossed the river and joined Swami B.R. Sridhar Navadvip in order to form the Mahamandala. Eventually, that entity morphed into the World Vaishnava Association, which it is known as today. We simply call it Neomat. This loosely knit organization is just as much the great sinister movement as was Gaudiya Math. The baton has been passed. Indeed, Neomat is more poisonous, more effective, more malefic, and more intent to destroy as many of Prabhupada's initiated disciples as it can. Although it may occasionally give lip service to Prabhupada, being the source of initiation for most of its top guns, it does not respect him. Gaudiya Math tagged Prabhupada with the backhanded compliment of, quote-unquote, Swami Maharaj. An attitude of minimization toward him has been passed down to Neomat, as could only be expected. The agent of injecting Gaudiya Mat influence, especially into the second echelon of so-called ISKCON, was Swami B.R. Sridhar of Navadvip. In the late 70s and throughout much of the 80s, the quote-unquote Shiksha Guru of Prabhupada, check out the context of why he wrote that in the 60s, the so-called Shiksha Guru was used by the 11 pretenders to their zonal advantages. But not long after, the Navadvip Mahant ended up using them through control of the second echelon. Anyone who is either an active member of Neomat or at bare minimum sentimentally approves of it is under the astral control of the Gaudiya Mat egregor and accordingly favorable to Swami B.R. Sridhar, whining that any criticism of him is quote-unquote offensive. The Gaudiya Mat egregor itself is now weak, and dedication to the reputation of Swami B.R. Sridhar by that rump remnant is similarly weak. Such is not the case with Neomat, however. It is strong and getting stronger. Its aura is pitch black. The convoluted situation of what superficially appears to be the Hare Krishna movement is so entangled that extraction from it by many thousands of devotees under its whammy of fear is extremely difficult. If you are attached to that man from Navadvip, then you are attached to a form breaker who destroyed 2 branches of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and you will be held accountable for influence you spread on his behalf. Indeed, it is almost impossible to extricate those who are under the grip of Neomat. It requires a massive exorcism. Neomat is virulently opposed to so-called ISKCON and vice versa, yet both are polluted products of Gaudiya Mat in general and Swami B.R. Sridhar in particular. This involves an intricately detailed and extensive history, however. There is another wing of Gaudiya Mat which is only strong in the Mathura district of Uttar Pradesh. It is separate from a connection to the legacy of Swami B.R. Sridhar. Due to its connection to the philosophy and style of Gaudiya Mat and its following of a different Gaudiya Mat leader, it can also be called Neomat. However, it is not a branch of the World Vaishnava Foundation nor aligned with it in any tangible way, except psychologically and philosophically. Its founder was Swami Narayan of the Keshavaji Gaudiya Mat in Mathura. Although he had a favorable relationship with Swami B.R. Sridhar while they were both living, they are both not so now, Swami Narayan was against how Swami B.R. Sridhar influenced, advised, instructed, and to some extent directed the vitiated GBC and its 11 pretender zonal acharyas in the spring of 1978. Swami Narayan was skeptical of how all of that went down, and he did express that criticism, but mostly privately. He was against those 11 great pretenders taking the pompous worship which they did, especially from their godbrothers. Swami Narayan was not implicated in the 1978 deviation of so-called ISKCON in any major way. Although the cult established in Swami Narayan's name, both before and after his demise, and many years after the first version of Neomat in Bengal was formed, although that cult can accurately be called another manifestation of Neomat, it is not the same version. The first one is far worse than the faction in the Mathura district. That first version still has many of its poison girls, read sannyasis and similar acolytes, preaching Gaudiya Mat nescience in a new and potent way. Now we segue to find the following Nairobi room conversation exchange between a somewhat impertinent Hindu man with His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This room conversation took place in Nairobi, Kenya, on October 28, 1975. Leading Secretary. He's asking, when did you become the spiritual leader of Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada. When my Guru Maharaj ordered me. This is the Guru Parampara. Indian man. Did he just, Prabhupada, try to understand? Don't go very speedily. A guru can become guru when he's ordered by his guru, that's all. Otherwise, nobody can become guru. Indian man. When did he tell you to? Prabhupada, what is this business? When did he tell me? And why shall I disclose to you? It is so very insignificant thing that I have to explain to you? Indian man. No, I'm just curious to know when. Prabhupada, you should be curious within your limit. You should know that one can become guru when he is ordered by his guru. This much. There are essential realizations to be gleaned from this exchange. Please note that those realizations relate to two conflicting views concerning the basic requirement of becoming a genuine guru in Prabhupada's branch of the Hare Krishna movement. One of the views is held by the majority, if not the totality, of the members of so-called ISKCON. The other view, a kind of minority report, is held by your host speaker and those who are members of or simpatico with the Vaishnava Foundation. Let us consider the air quotes ISKCON view. It all centers around the following well-known verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 7, text 128. Yare dekha tare kaha Krishna upadesh, amara agyaya guru hana tara eidesh. Whoever you meet, tell him about the instruction of Krishna. In this way, by my order, become a spiritual master and deliver everyone in this land. Unquote. Lord Chaitanya spoke that, of course, and it is a generic order. The Diksha Guru initiates his disciple, and in the process, and just as importantly, in the context of this verse, the initiating spiritual master is responsible to carry the true message as it is and deliver his disciple from samsara. Some interpret this verse to mean that anyone, by his own judgment in the jurisdiction of its organization, is eligible to become an initiating guru under the generic umbrella of this order from Lord Chaitanya. In other words, in the majority report, a direct order to any individual devotee is not required from anyone else, including the previous spiritual master. The ISKCON, air quotes, ISKCON cult sentiment is that the overall scope or generic order of this Chaitanya Charitamrita verse from over 500 years ago is just as applicable now as it allegedly was at that time. This begs the question of how it is applicable and how it is to be implemented. Yet, just as importantly, if not more importantly, are there any other orders which modify or fine-tune it? In point of fact, there are. And how that applies to the current situation, some consider it a deplorable situation, of the Hare Krishna movement, is what we're going to discuss here. First, however, we need some perspective. A major deviation with many components went down in the late 70s in connection to Prabhupada's branch of the Chaitanya movement. Prabhupada called his organization ISKCON, an acronym for International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In the late 70s, the deviation was so great that, in effect, ISKCON was uprooted and replaced by so-called ISKCON. So-called ISKCON is a devotional, pseudo-devotional weed and it was present even when Prabhupada was physically manifest. But in the late 70s, it was fed highly enriched Bengali soil. The seeds that were planted in it and sprouted and blossomed produced poisonous fruit. The corresponding transformation, which of course was the zonal Acharya imposition, lasted a little over 8 dreadful years and was replaced by the collegiate compromise, a different deviation, which ran a longer course. That one morphed into both a dependency upon and a conversion into a quasi-Hindu entity, allegedly with Krishna at its center, the current version of the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation, and that transformation is now at its fag end. The perspective just mentioned is to see all of this for what it actually is. Such a vision requires everyone, all the sincere and serious devotees of Prabhupada, to transcend the myopic limitations of this spot life. The devotees who joined Prabhupada's movement while it functioned in a bona fide way, which it did for about 11 years or so, should not focus upon small spans of time, including our own lifetimes. Lord Chaitanya's movement has undergone many peaks and valleys since he and Lord Nityananda inaugurated it in the late 15th century. We are in one of those troghs at this time, and it's a nasty one, to be sure. Yet there is a radical juxtaposition connected to it, one in which there is much good to somewhat balance. To say that it fully balances would be a bridge too far, but there's enough good in it to somewhat balance the major deviations that have manifested. And of them, the initiation situation is the most grievous, obviously. This presentation today, that you are listening to now or reading in the transcript, will help to make that fact crystal clear. However, there is at this time tremendous communication facilitations available to any and all devotees who wish to take advantage of it. Prabhupada's preaching has been made available, very easy access through media of many varieties. The pieces of the puzzle can be put together, and the real history can be gleaned. Communication between and amongst devotees is outstanding compared to what it was during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you want to know the truth, you can find it, especially on the internet, although it still takes considerable effort. Notwithstanding that, major global improvement may not transpire during our lifetimes. In due course, however, Lord Chaitanya's movement will spread widely to every town and village in its unfettered form. The poison tree will be exposed for just what it is, and it must be, and it will be overcome. Malefic forces now have the upper hand because deviation has taken over of what appears to be the Krishna consciousness movement. This is problematic because there are now thousands of improperly initiated people spawned by hundreds of bogus Vaishnav gurus. All great developments of the future, and some of them are provisional, have only sentimental value at this time unless you can realize what the poison tree is and become completely unconnected to and unaffected by it. Opposing it is helpful. Exposing it by potent preaching helps to become unaffected by it. Seeing this great sinister movement for what it is, what it has done to Prabhupada's movement, when you see it for what it is, it brings unpalatable realizations. You must accept them and have enough spiritual courage to do so. When you first realize that there are many thousands of improperly initiated disciples of hundreds of bogus gurus pushing opposed nonsense from all three deviant camps, that realization initially creates psychic pain. Confront that pain. Do not try to escape it. The current situation is insanity's horse adorning the sky in Kali Yuga. When you realize that all three of the deviant camps, parading, both as gurus and their allegedly initiated disciples, when you realize that they're covering Krishna consciousness in the name of spreading it, despair may begin to enter your mental quantum. Catch that if it develops, and catch it as soon as possible, and then drive it out. Tattvamasi. Those three dangerous cults, all branches of and connected to the poison tree, will continue to lead astray unfortunate devotees, but you need not be one of them. The realizations given to you here are integral to putting the pieces together within your higher intelligence. Understand the poison tree. Understand it from what it first was, and understand what it was at the time of Prabhupada warned about it. You cannot become free from bewilderment without successfully realizing these things. You cannot attain cosmic consciousness, nirvana, Brahma nirvana, or vimukti if you allow yourself to become an improperly initiated disciple. And if you're not one, then be compassionate. Help your fellow man to become free from losing the human opportunity. Quote, unless one is initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, all his devotional activities are useless. A person who is not properly initiated can descend again into the animal species, unquote. That's from Hari Bhakti Vilas, Chapter 2, Text 6. And here's another one. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, Chapter 1, Text 35, Purport. One should always remember that a person who is reluctant to accept a spiritual master and be initiated is sure to be baffled in his endeavor to go back to Godhead. One who is not properly initiated may present himself as a great devotee, but in fact he is sure to encounter many stumbling blocks on his path of progress towards spiritual realization, with the result that he must continue his term of material existence without relief. Such a helpless person is compared to a ship without a rudder, for such a ship can never reach its destination. Unquote. Gokulananda, do you have any questions about any of these topics?
Yes, I have many such questions. My first one is this. The poison tree is obviously an analogy, so it can never be perfect. However, it can be explained with enough clarity, and I'm asking you to do that. Is the poison tree still Gaudiya Mutt as it was in 1970?
The trunk or essence of it is the same. Its constituents are now different.
Is ISKCON part of the poison tree?
Affirmative. So-called ISKCON is a very big branch of it. The trunk is Gaudiya Mutt, but the trunk is not nearly as important now as its three branches. So-called ISKCON is one of those branches and has been since the late 70s.
Obviously, Neo-Mutt is one of them.
Obviously. There are two Neo-Mutt branches now, as aforementioned. Swami B.R. Sridhar was the founder of the main one, and Swami Narayan is the founder of the smaller one in the Mathura district.
However, you mentioned three branches. How can the third one be Ritvik?
The third branch is most definitely Ritvik. This is not well known, because Swami B.R. Sridhar did a bait and switch in his final will and testament. He named his successor there, but he stated that that man was his successor as a Ritvik representative on his behalf. In conjunction with this, he stated that he was doing this just as Swami Maharaj did.
And that led to the Ritvik movement?
Swami B.R. Sridhar died in August 1988. His will then became known. Ritvik first surfaced in Mississippi in November 1988. The occult correlation is uncanny. By occult means, Swami B.R. Sridhar was a major factor in launching the heretical Ritvik movement. The astral plane works like that, but it takes higher intelligence to understand it.
Is the trunk of the poison tree more important than any of these three branches now constituting it?
It is exponentially less important. Gaudiya Math is no longer a factor in victimizing those who are members of, were members of, or are now attracted to Prabhupada's Hare Krishna movement. Remember, analogies are never perfect, and this demonstrates that. It's better to simultaneously employ the analogy in conjunction with reality.
What is that reality?
The reality is that Gaudiya Math has passed the baton to Neo-Math. So-called ISKCON fights Neo-Math for disciples, but so-called ISKCON is still strongly connected to the poison tree. So-called ISKCON is an egregor, Neo-Math is a separate egregor, and Ritvik is the other egregor. These last three mentioned egregors are all fighting on the pseudo-esoteric plane. Their egregors exist on the astral. They're all engaged in covering Krishna consciousness in the name of spreading it, fighting one another, yet ultimately all poisoned, originally from the same source, Gaudiya Math, which is now a weak egregor.
It seems not only diabolical, but almost impossible to overcome.
That's why Prabhupada called it the Great Sinister Movement in that letter to Hangsadutta in 1970. That's why Prabhupada said that his movement was in, quote unquote, a very dangerous position due to the influence that had invaded it at that time and could infatuate devotees, what to speak of now? That great sinister movement has, for all practical purposes, taken over. Indeed, although corporate ISKCON still exists, the real ISKCON movement was murdered in the late 70s. The fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation choked it to death as a competitor creeper, one which was actually a highly inimical pseudo-spiritual weed. Neo-Math piled on not long after that to further complicate the situation. Then, about a decade after this, out pops the Ritvik heresy from the ocean of nescience. You have every reason to feel that the situation is both impossible to rectify and hopeless.
Is there a solution?
Prabhupada said that the poison would not be able to act if his disciples were as good as Prahlad Maharaj. This was mostly in reference to the movement's leaders, of course. Well, they weren't. They fell woefully short of that purity, particularly in 1978. They were little more than silly putty in Swami B.R. Sridhar's hands. He easily manipulated them into buying into his slogans, tropes, and intoxicating advice. Thus was spawned the zonal acharya scam, which murdered ISKCON. There is no international solution. That institution is dead, although still flapping on the sand due to Hindu financing. The international institution has no spiritual value or sequence. On the contrary, it is spiritually and devotionally defunct and dangerous. There is a solution on the individual level, but it requires commitment, personal courage, sharp intelligence, and the ability to cut the ropes. These ropes are the orbits of society, friendship, love, family, and business ties connected to any of the three deviant groups. Preaching against all three of them helps to cut those ropes.
Is there a key realization which opens up a devotee's power to transcend the influence of today's poison tree?
Most definitely there is. It's understanding what Prabhupada meant when he said at the Krishna Balaram Center in Ramanreti in late May of 1977. I am referring to when he said, quote, "but by my order," unquote. This is the key. But few devotees possess it in order to unlock the mystery. Amara Agyaya Guru Hana, be actually Guru, but by my order.
Some interpret it to mean the generic order given by Lord Chaitanya, allowing someone to become Guru when he believes himself qualified to be an initiating spiritual master. Is this wrong?
It's dead wrong. And that does not go on in ISKCON anyway.
But they utilize that rationalization, don't they?
Of course they do. But it does not match the reality and therefore is contradictory and illogical. However, the cult's acolytes are not bastions of even basic logic, so they do not recognize the contradiction.
If they are utilizing such a generic authorization, but are not actually acting upon that so as to secure the post of Guru, then what is actually the basis or source of their claim to being spiritual masters?
Superficially, their basis or source is the no objection certificate.
That would mean GBC imprimatur is the actual basis or source?
Secondarily, but still prominently.
Is this where the whole thing first deviated?
No, it's much more subtle than that. The vitiated GBC was a bridge. The actual basis is the poison tree. That source was personified by Swami B.R. Sridhar. He authorized the zonal scam, especially when he said, quote, "Ritvik Acharya, then it becomes as good as Acharya," unquote. It meant that, since Prabhupada appointed them Ritviks, they were automatically appointed as spiritual masters after he left the scene. This is the bait and switch, by the way. The authority to do what was done in the late 70s came from Swami B.R. Sridhar. He was the chief representative of the poison tree at that time and throughout much of the 80s. He authorized the 11 great pretenders. Only appointed by Prabhupada to be Ritviks, he authorized them to be so-called spiritual masters with the alleged right and power to initiate new people into a connection with the parampara. This would be a right that none of those men ever had, nor the others who followed them as institutional gurus in various GBC iterations of votes, no 3 blackballs, and then the no objection certificate. It would be a right that none of them had.
What then is the root of the deviation? Is it a misinterpretation? Is it an outright rebellion against Prabhupada? Was it the desire to imitate him?
It was and is all of those, and more. The key which unlocks the requisite realizations, which puts the pieces of the puzzle together, is his statement, quote, "but by my order," unquote. That does not mean the generic order of Lord Chaitanya. It means that any initiating guru in Prabhupada's branch must have his, Prabhupada's order in order to be guru. It does not mean receiving some kind of certification from a governing body after waiting in queue and keeping your nose clean for 2 or 3 years.
What if Lord Chaitanya ordered one of Prabhupada's genuinely initiating disciples to be guru?
If Bhagavad Tattva were to give the order, that would come from Lord Nityananda. However, he would not do so in this particular situation, since Prabhupada was and is the Uttama Guru of such a qualified disciple, and since Prabhupada is Mukta Jiva like Narada Muni, Lord Nityananda would have him give his disciple the order.
Some may argue that Prabhupada, since he is no longer physically manifest, cannot give the order directly anymore to anyone.
Those making that argument are neither occultists nor actual believers in spiritual realization and the perfection in human life. Contact with great personalities is always provisionally available. What to speak of contact between an advanced disciple and his Mukta Jiva Guru?
Did Prabhupada receive the order to be an initiating guru?
2 examples suffice as conclusive evidence that he did. One was already presented, but I'll repeat it. That Prabhupada did receive the order, and that it was required that he so received it from his spiritual master, is confirmed by this evidence. So there's going to be 2 evidences given. Here's the first of the 2. Quote, from a September 24th, 1968 interview, quote, so far as I am concerned, I belong to Lord Chaitanya's disciplic succession, and my spiritual master, who was just 9th generation from Lord Chaitanya, he ordered me that, quote, you try to spread this Krishna consciousness in the Western world. Therefore, in pursuance of his order, I have come here, unquote. The next one, which is repeated from earlier in our presentation, is even more specific. Leading secretary. He's asking, when did you become the spiritual leader of Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada. When my Guru Maharaj ordered me. This is the Guru Parampara. Indian man, did he just, Prabhupada, try to understand? Don't go very speedily. A guru can become guru when he's ordered by his guru, that's all. Otherwise, nobody can become guru. Indian man, when did he tell you to, Prabhupada, what is the business? When did he tell me? And why shall I disclose to you? It is so very insignificant thing that I have to explain to you? Indian man, no, I'm just curious to know when. Prabhupada, you should be curious within your limit. You should know that one can become guru when he is ordered by his guru, this much.
Since Prabhupada designated the GBC as the ultimate managerial authority, the argument is made that it has the power to appoint gurus to represent the institution it manages. As such, could not one of its devotees receive the order from Prabhupada and then also receive the no objection certificate and function within that institution as an initiating guru?
It would require impossible circumstances. It would require the vitiated GBC to be bona fide. It has not been bona fide since the spring of 1978 and was slipping badly even before that. If the absurd timing factors were met, the order from Prabhupada would have to exactly correspond in time with a bona fide GBC granting the no objection certificate. This is literally impossible because a member of so-called ISKCON has to first be recommended by a godbrother, recognized by the GBC. Then he has to formally apply for certification, then observe patience for the commission's judgment, then wait in queue for a year, 2 or 3 before certification is granted. If Prabhupada gave one of his genuinely initiated disciples, and this would not include any of today's so-called Ritvik initiates, if he gave one of his genuinely initiated disciples the order to be spiritual master, that person receiving the order would be obliged to immediately, at the very least, begin canvassing prospective disciples. In most cases, he would already have, at bare minimum, dedicated followers. He could not and would not wait for such a bureaucratic approval and process. If he did so, that would be an offense to his spiritual master and to the order. His empowerment would thus be withdrawn, and he would fall down from the status of a regular guru, the monitor guru who is authorized to accept a limited number of initiated disciples.
The chief fault or evil in all of this appears to be the poison tree. Should we conclude that so-called ISKCON is only secondarily culpable?
Genuine devotees are both expert and practical. Utility is the principle. Gaudiya Math has no outreach to the West or to other disciples and followers of Prabhupada except in India. And there, so-called ISKCON is far more widespread than Gaudiya Math. Neo-Math has considerable outreach in the West, but not as much as so-called ISKCON. So-called ISKCON is what we must be concerned with most today. Exposing and combating all of the institutional nescience means that the so-called ISKCON branch of the poison tree is by far the prominent source of turmoil in pseudo-devotional life in the world at this time. So-called ISKCON is primarily responsible for all that has gone down since the late 70s. Its leaders allowed themselves to be duped by the main representative of the poison tree. Intelligence is not served by relegating so-called ISKCON to a secondary status in terms of damage done. So-called ISKCON is the chief enemy now, and it has been so for decades. The colossal hoax, known as the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation, is a pseudo-spiritual scam. Its carnival dogs have consumed the lines. In order to expose it, everything about it must be known. Its narrative must be replaced by the real narrative of what went down and why. That has been presented to you in enough requisite detail in this audio podcast, along with a helpful transcription. You're welcome. Sadeva Samya